Alright, welcome back. In today's video, I want to play around with some Alakazam power. Alakazam used to be a very powerful Pokemon, and it's a glass cannon Pokemon, so it's supposed to do lots of damage, be really fast. But unfortunately, both of its claims to fame have somewhat been overshadowed in more recent years. If we look at Alakazam's speed stat, it has 120, which is very good. But items like the Choice Scarf make many Pokemon faster than Alakazam in normal gameplay, meaning that Alakazam doesn't really outspeed much. Now Alakazam can run its own Choice Scarf, but then it is much weaker and locked into moves that might not be as favorable. Alakazam is somewhat exploitable because it either is going to click Psychic moves, which is good, or it's going to be clicking Focus Blast for the Steels and the Dark types. It can also run Dazzling Gleam for the Dark types, but then it gets hard-walled by Steel types, so that's not really an option. It has to have Focus Blast on its moveset, almost always. And 135 special attack is nothing to sneeze at, but its ability doesn't help it boost its power. Now, Magic Guard does mean it can run Life Orb, and that is good, but at the same time, Life Orb sets definitely come with drawbacks. The chief among them being you don't get your Focus Sash, for instance. Today we're actually going to be going beyond just a Life Orb and going with Choice Specs. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I want some immediate power with Alakazam. Alakazam usually relies on your opponent predicting, right? Are they going to click a Psychic move or are they going to click Focus Blast? And if I can capitalize on those one-turn predictions and get lots of damage off in that one turn, I think I'm in a better position. So we hopefully will see today sort of what that looks like when we have our opponents switch in their Galarian Slowking and it takes loss from Psy Shock, right, or the Blissey or whatever, or if they switch in their Assault Vest and Metal and they take a lot from Focus Blast, right? They maybe switch out the next turn is something different, but with Choice Specs I can hit even harder than I would with Life Orb. This is especially important because we're going to be running Expanding Force as a secondary option. Now, Psyshock is there for Pokemon like Blissey and Assault Vest, Galarian Slowking, and that's really important to have the ability to hit them, but Expanding Force is a fun move that you don't get on Tapu Lele, so you have to run on a secondary Psychic type, which is why we're doubling up on the Psychics. And Expanding Force doubles its power in terrain, so that's what our goal is, to just be clicking Expanding Force as much as possible. Now Tapu Lele could run a Terrain Extender to help with that, but it's not every time that I'm going to go from Tapu Lele into Alakazam, so I don't necessarily want to rely on the Psychic Spam necessarily. Tapu Lele makes a good Choice Scarfer, and I do like having a fast Tapu Lele. Now this Lele is going to also be running Psyshock just because I don't like getting walled out by a Blissey, and then Moonblast and Focus Blast is sort of required on Tapu Lele as well. In the final slot you can run all sorts of things. You could run Psychic if you wanted, or you could run Future Sight, that's another one that people often run. Thunder or Thunderbolt is sometimes ran as well. And Thunder is just a stronger version of Thunderbolt, obviously, with the lower accuracy. Why do we run Thunder? It's for Pokemon like Corviknight. If you want to get a OHKO on them, you often need to run Thunder, given the spreads that they're currently running. So I'm just running Thunder in this slot. You can switch it out for Thunderbolt if you don't like missing. Next up, I decided to put Buzzwole. The reason Buzzwole is on this team is for Pokemon like Dark types, like Weavile, and I guess Bisharp technically. Pokemon that would maybe give my Psychic types a hard time. And so having Psychic and Fighting together on the same team is quite good, and Buzzwole is the premier Fighting type in the game. It's also good for opposing Fighting types, like anything that's Choice Scarf, maybe a Choice Scarf Nianshao, and they're going to click Knockoff on my Psychic type. Well, I can go into Buzzwole, not care about what they're going to do either. Now this Buzzwole here is going to be more offensively based Buzzwole, so it's not going to take as many hits as a more defensive based Buzzwole, but there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, Heatran is a big problem, Heatran is a very good steel type, and it's going to make Alakazam and Tapu Lele always be clicking Focus Blast. If I can get rid of Heatran, that'd be fantastic, and the way I'm going to do that, in theory, is by clicking Close Combat on an offensively based Buzzwole. A lot of Heatrans come in onto Buzzwole thinking that I'll scare you out if they don't know your set particularly, and if I can stay in and one-shot them with Close Combat, all of a sudden my Psychic types are now freed up. So that's the goal. It also catches unsuspecting players' Landos unaware, and Lando is a pretty big problem. It's pretty beefy. It can take 1 or 2 hits from most of these Pokemon, especially the more defensive sets. And so Ice Punch is really nice to be able to just outspeed all the Landos and kill it right away. Close Combat, of course, is there because you need it. Roost is quite good for longevity. And then finally, I am running Leech Life today. Leech Life helps with Galarian Slowking for sure, and helps as well with other opposing Psychic types. And Psychic types annoy each other, so if I can get a Psychic type on any switch-in, that would be nice. We're running Expert Belt because Expert Belt boosts your attack without having to deal with Life Orb, and I needed it to get a guaranteed knockout on certain Heatran spreads, so that's why we're running Expert Belt. Volcanion is a Pokemon that I have mixed feelings about, especially in the LU tier. It's very strong, which is nice, but it also wastes a lot of EVs or IVs or base stats rather. It wastes a lot of base stats on its attack, and I'd rather see that into speed. Of course, then it would be very strong and very busted, and maybe they didn't want that or something. I don't know, but I just wish that Volcanion had a better stat distribution. And besides that, Steam Eruption is its strongest move and has a chance to miss, which is never fun. But the reason we put Volcanion on today is because of Pokemon like Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini is going to come in, it's going to mess up my terrain, and I don't want that. I also want a good, safe, and reliable water switch-in. And this isn't reliable at 100% because there are certain Pokemon like Troudon that, of course, Volcanion cannot switch into necessarily unless you want to be really predicting. But it does its job pretty adequately, and we're running the 4 attack set with the heavy duty boots, that way we can switch up our moves, and we can hit Sludge Wave on Tapu Fini after it comes on the Steam Eruption. Dragonite's coming up next, and the reason Dragonite is here is because this is an offensive based team, and I want to have a Pokemon that can 1, eat hits, because of multi-scale Dragonite can almost always eat 1 hit, and I want a Pokemon that has some breaking power. Dragon Dance allows us to get faster and stronger than we were before, and that will aid us in becoming more capable of breaking through fat or getting late game sweeps. And finally, Dragonite is also off the ground, so if you look at Volcanion and the 2 Psychics, they're all grounded Pokemon, and Buzzwole is resistant to Earthquake, but I want something that is just immune to Earthquake straight up. We're going with Dragonite. And we're running Dual Wing Beat, Earthquake. It's a pretty standard move set to run on Dragonite. We're not going to run Extreme Speed on this Dragonite because we have Psychic Terrain, so just keep that in mind. Finally, we have Zapdos, and Zapdos is going to be running this particular move set. We're going to forego Toxic. For Defog, we need to have some kind of way to remove hazards. This team does not have hazards. We've got to watch out for that, but at the very least we can get rid of them, and I'm running U-turn because I want to have some way of getting momentum with this team. I have absolutely no other U-turn or Volt Switch on this team, and I want some way to get Pokemon in safely, specifically things like Alakazam, so that's what we're going with here. I'm just running the standard EV spread that they give you. I don't really know exactly what this is for, and part of me wants to make it a more bulky Zapdos, that way I have slower U-turns. And maybe that's something that you can play around with, but this is just the spread that they gave us. Discharge is there because you do want some form of electric move, and so that's sort of what we're dealing with here. Overall, this team has a few weaknesses. First of all, it's very Ghost weak. We don't have a good Ghost switch-in, or any Ghost switch-in really. For Pokemon like Choice Scarf Blacephalon, which outspeeds even Tapu Lele, is going to just mess up our day. Dragapult is going to mess us up. So this really is not the greatest team. It has major ghost weakness and a ghost problem. This team also has no electric immunity. A Pokemon like Regieleki should have a field day on us. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this team. There are some weaknesses. Another interesting thing is that this team doesn't really commit to any one particular strategy. It is offensive, but is not hyper offensive. It has Psychic Terrain with Expanding Forest Zam, but it doesn't commit to the Psychic Spam strategy. Not that I think that's a particularly strong strategy, but just note that this team doesn't really commit to any one strategy hard, so it's hard necessarily sometimes to know what the game plan is going into a game, so you have to sort of feel it out as you go. But overall, I think the mons I chose definitely can fulfill their roles as long as the team matchup is good, because they were put there for a reason. And so now we will see the games, and hopefully they're good. Game 1 is against a really interesting team. The core looks sort of like Stall, but then they've got a Regieleki, so I don't really know exactly what this team is trying to do. But what I do know is that the Regieleki messes me up. I don't have a ground or an electric immunity or ground type or anything like that, and I have at least a couple members that really don't like getting electric removed. So I have to play around with that. I'm going to lead off with Tapu Lele in case they lead off with Regieleki. I feel like Regieleki is a very safe lead against me. And if they lead off with a Latios, I can Choice Scarf, which will help as well. If they lead off with Skarmory, I can easily go Zapdos to do whatever the heck I want. So I'm going to lead off with the Lele. And they are going to decide to lead off with the Landorus. And Landorus is a problem. I don't really know what this Landorus wants to do, so I'm going to click Psyshock, and that does a lot. At this point, I'm no longer locked in. I'm going to go for Moonblast in case they decide to go Latios. And at this point, why not click Thunder, right? You're going to go Skarmory. You already sacked your Landorus. Now, they could have been cussed up Skarmory there, but they were not. I'm going to save my Tapu Lele here. I'm going to Zapdos. Now, Zapdos doesn't do too much against this team. It doesn't really do anything to Latios because it doesn't have Toxic, it doesn't beat Galarian Slowking, and it's not immune to Regieleki, and so it doesn't do anything to that either. So it really can't do much, so I'm going to throw it away in front of the Gastrodon if I need to, and it also helps get a defog off. Now my opponent has already sacked 2 Pokemon in the first few turns for his Spike and damage off on Lele, which isn't particularly that great. It did mean I wasn't Choice Scarfed anymore, so maybe that's good for his Regieleki and his Latios. But that's about as much as we can say there. In any case, I'm going to get my defog off. They're going to burn me with Scald, which is fine. I don't care about that too much, and that's, pretty fair for Scald. Here, they've gotten a good amount of damage off on me. I'm going to roost it off. I don't really know what this Gastrodon wants to do. At this point, they may go for Earth Power, so I'm going to U-turn out, and I'm going to get my terrain back up. That way I can start spamming expanding forest. I'm actually going to save Tapu Lele for the terrain. I'm going to go hard into Zam. Zam has, passable Spadef, and has Magic Guard, doesn't care about burn. And expanding forest doesn't actually one-shot the Gastrodon. Gastrodon usually is specially defensive, but still, I am a bit disappointed that Spec Zam wasn't able to one-shot. At this point, Alakazam has done his job. Psyshock could have been nice, I suppose, against the Slowking, but I really don't have a switch in to Regieleki, which is sad. Now, I could have maybe sacked a different Pokemon, but most of the other Pokemon were useful. I guess I could have sacked Zapdos. Maybe I should have sacked Zapdos, because then I could have come back in later, put Spec Psyshock on the Buzzwole. That could have been a thing. But the Alakazam was very low HP, and I felt like the low HP meant that it wasn't going to be able to do too much at this point. It doesn't have Dazzling Gleam for Latios. Going to be outsped by Regieleki every time. And Spec Psyshock out of train to Slowking isn't going to do overly much, and then Slowking just kills it. Anyway, at this point he Volt switches into Galarian Slowking. Galarian Slowking is somewhat of an issue for this team, don't really have too much for it, you would think, with all the Psychic spam and the Psy-shocking, but Slowking is a beefy boy and has Sludge Bomb for Tapu Lele and can eat at least one hit from Alakazam, so it's a bit of a dilemma. I could go into Dragonite, but it could have Ice Beam, and I don't want to Dragon Dance up on a full HP Galarian Slowking. Maybe one that had Chip on it, that would be a different story. So I'm going to go Buzzwole, because Buzzwoles don't usually carry Psychic moves besides Future Sight, so it can't immediately damage me is what I'm thinking. And Buzzwole doesn't really do too well against Latias, which can outspeed and kill it with a Psychic move, or Regieleki. So I'm just going to get some chip off with this. It actually shows Flamethrower, which does quite a lot, and I could stay and get more Leech Life off, but at this point I say, well, Volcanion eats Flamethrowers, that's no problem for it. I'm going to click Steam Eruption in case they decide to switch out into anything else, but they don't. So at this point I will Earth Power. Earth Power would have been a 2-hit KO if I decided to go for it. And at this point I Steam Eruption in case they switch into Latias, and it actually turns to be a double down. So I'm really glad that I got rid of the Galarian Slowking here, because it was sort of a problem for the remainder of my team. Although at that low of HP, it would have had trouble beating a lot of the members on my team as well. So maybe they didn't really feel like it was valuable either, I don't know. I'm going to go into Zapdos as fodder to see what's up. They may go into Regieleki to get a free kill, in which case I want to maybe sag Zapdos. Or if they go into Latias, I can see what they want to do. They go Latias. Now at this point I could U-turn. Ignore what just happened on the screen. I could go for U-turn, but if it's weakness policy, I'm not going to do too much damage, and they're going to get a +2 to both stats if they're the stored power set. So that's a major problem. I don't necessarily want to click U-turn. So I'm just going to click Discharge this turn to see what the Latias wants to do. Maybe I can get a lucky pair since I don't have Toxic. The Latias goes for Sucker Punch. That's not a move you usually see. In fact, that's a move you never see on Latias. It's not a good move on Latias. You can see it did not do much. It's not stab. Latias has a much higher special attack stat compared to its attack stat, and it really has no business being a Sucker Puncher, especially because Latias can have up to 350 speed. That's way faster than most Pokemon. So at this point I Discharge Paralyze it, which is really good. I had 2 chances that turn to Paralyze it with Sucker Punch, Static, and Discharge. So it was at least a coin flip at that point to get a pair. I'm going to Roost here as they Sucker Punch again. And I don't know, I haven't calced it, but I feel like this leads me to believe that this might be some kind of banded Latias, which is really funny. It's sort of cute, but I wouldn't recommend running it. At this point though, I can safely U-turn because I know that they are locked in, or at the very least they're not weakness policy. And actually that turns to be a very good turn to U-turn out, because they go into Regieleki. Now at this point I have to commit to Dragonite. Dragonite's not going to take much from Electro Ball because of multi-scale, and I'm actually going to Dragon Dance up, which means I will take even less the following turn from Electro Ball. The next turn they're going to go for Ancient Power. Now Ancient Power I'm weak to because I'm a flying type, whereas electric moves I'm neutral because I'm Dragon and Flying. And so yes, he clicked the button that I was weak to, but at the same time it's questionable whether this was the best play just because you don't get Transistor Boost, and so it's not very strong. I suppose maybe you could get the boost of your own and that would be a major problem for me. I don't know what they were thinking. In any case, I Dragon Dance up again because now I will outspeed you. I'm just going to click the Safe Earthquake, and that's the game. Because at this point Latias will come out. It's going to click Sucker Punch, it does not kill, and Dual Wing Beat actually kills the Latias. So it must have been some kind of offensive Latias. But Tapu Lele would have cleaned up at that point even if they'd taken my Dragonite out. So that was an interesting game. Was not expecting Choice banded Latias, but it did clue me into the fact that I have no electric immunity on my team, and that my team does struggle with Galarian Slowking. So we'll see if those come back to bite me later on. Okay, game 2. Here we have a pretty scary team with Terrakion. Terrakion's another UUBL Pokemon that I personally don't think is particularly good, because Stone Edge plus Close Combat is very good stab to have, but if you have to use Stone Edge, you're going to be missing a lot of your moves, and I really think that just makes for not a good Pokemon. But you know, it still is really good because you can hit those flying types with a stab, stone edge, and that makes Terrakion quite scary if it hits. And therein lies the problem. That and Terrakion has been a bit power crept in terms of power over the generations. But in any case, we do notice that they are going to have another Galarian Slowking. Once again, that's going to be an issue. And Melmetal is almost certainly going to be Assault Vest, which against all of my special attackers is somewhat of a problem. I do have Buzzwole, but I sort of want to keep Buzzwole healthy as possible for Kartana. Kartana shouldn't be able to break my Buzzwole plus Zapdos plus Dragonite, and that's what I'm hoping for. And Zapdos itself is not really that big of an issue because it's pretty passive and doesn't have Weather Ball going for it. So my own Zapdos should be able to get in on it and mess it up. And also my Psychic types will break it just fine. So I'm going to lead off with Tapu Lele. The reason to lead off with the Lele is that if they lead Terrakion, I'm Choice Scarf. I can outspeed it and blow it back. And I don't want Terrakion messing me up. Of course, it could be Focus Sash, but there's no way for me to know that in any gameplay, and I have no Stealth Rock to take advantage of it. So something's going to have to take the hit no matter what. If they lead with Melmetal, I have Zapdos and Buzzwole, and to a lesser extent Volcanion that can come in. I have, if they lead off with Slowking, I'd like to get damage off with Psyshock on that. And if they lead off with Zapdos, I can stay in, or I can go my own Zapdos. I have options, right? So I'm going to lead off with my Tapu Lele, as they are going to lead off with their Landorus. And at this point, I'm just going to say, same as last game, I'm going to get off damage with Psyshock. There's a lot less on this one, so this is a more defensively based Landorus. Now I'm going to go into my Zapdos because obviously Kartana is a big problem. And now I know they're not going to stay in, so I get to get a free U-turn to see what they're going to go into. And what this U-turn chip actually does is it puts their Landorus in range of another Psyshock. And for some reason they don't calc that or see it, and so they sack that. Here they're going to predict my Zapdos to come back in, which is good, but they go into their own Zapdos, which does not threaten my Zapdos. You can see that discharge is 30%. Here they click Hurricane, because I guess maybe they think it'll do more damage, and technically maybe it would, I don't know, but it's not going to do anything really, and I'm just going to U-turn out at this point into my Tapu Lele, which can easily click Psyshock. I'm not going to predict the Melmetal coming in. I don't really care if the Melmetal comes in, because I have Zapdos, and I want to get the pair off on it if I can. I actually get the pair here, which is nice. In a U-turn, save this for death fodder. I'm going to go into Volcanion on the double Iron Bash. And at this point, I know they're Assault Vest, almost certainly, but I want to get Chip off on it. I'm going to go for Steam Eruption here, try to get the burn on something that wants to come in. I never get the burn with Steam Eruption, so I'm going to go into Tapu Lele here because they're almost certainly going to click Future Sight, and I want to be able to click Psyshock. Here, I think maybe I'll be able to get the roll, but it's not a roll, or I don't get it, and I actually lose my Tapu Lele. But that's fine, I didn't want to switch into Future Sight anyway, and now I get to go to Zam and click another Psyshock. The reason to click Psyshock is for this guy right here. This does way more than I believe than Expanding Force, and now Psyshock is going to 2 KO out of terrain Zapdos. Since we didn't have that much terrain left, didn't want to lock into Expanding Force, and at this point Kartana is going to come out, and I'm going to sack my Zapdos, see if I can get a last second pair. No pair this time, fair enough. I'm going to Buzzwole, scare this out, and I know I'm going to scare it out, so I'm going to click Leech Life. And Leech Life's able to take this Slowking out, and I already am at +1 now, so I know I'm going to live any hit that the Terrakion wants to go for. I'm going to CC it, and it's going to be dead. And then finally, the Kartana is going to come out, and I'm going to be a Buzzwole and take any hit other than Aerial Ace, and I'm going to just CC it, and that'll be the game. So this was a pretty easy 4-0, despite the opponent having a pretty scary team and having certain mons that really messed up my Psychic Spam core. I was able to get past them and punch holes and everything to the point where I was able to sweep with a Buzzwole in the end. So that was pretty good. Next up, we're going to have just a really quick game. My opponent's team isn't the greatest, but it's a really fun looking team. None of these Pokemon are OU, so this could have been taken down easily to the UU tier, and then maybe they would have found more success, I'm not sure. But it's a really fun team, so I decided to include it. It's got Scolipede, which is one of my favorite Pokemon, and it's got Indeedee. They're running a female Indeedee, which I'm not sure why, because male Indeedee is almost always better. And they've got Salamence, which can always be scary, and Aegislash, which, previous gens was Ubers, and in this gen actually still can put in a decent amount of work, so you got to be careful. And Azumarill. Azumarill is pretty threatening, but I do have some pretty good checks to it, so I'm not too worried about it. Now, I'm pretty sure they're going to lead with Scolipede. Scolipede come in two flavors. You have the Sweeper variety and you have the Hazards variety. And this, to me, seems like a team where you want Hazards, because you've got Choice Specs or Choice Band Aegislash, and you've got Belly Drum Azumarill, and you've got Moxie Salamence, and what you want is to have all the Pokemon getting chipped down and have Spikes, Toxic Spikes, messing up their day. That makes sense to me. So I'm going to lead off with Dragonite, try to get a dual Wing Beat off, or try to get a little mini sweep going in the beginning, because they have nothing for Dragonite. But instead, they're actually going to lead off with the Crocodile, so I'm going to switch out. Don't want to get this multi-skill broken. I'm going to go into Zapdos. Maybe they'll click Knock Off and get paralyzed. They don't do that, so I'm going to click Defog on the Stealth Rock because they Toxic me. This turn, they're actually going to click Knock Off. They do not get paralyzed, and I'm going to U-turn out because I want to go into my Buzzwole to scare this out. Now, Buzzwole always invites an Aegislash, and Aegislash is one of the best answers to Buzzwole, so I'm going to go hard Volcanion, and they have no switch-ins to Volcanion. Steam Eruption here, see if I get the burn. Of course not. And I can finish it off with a Sludge Wave. Gotta watch out for the Sludge Wave. The Sludge Wave is the reason why Volcanion is able to beat Tapu Lele, Tapu Fini rather, sorry, Tapu Fini, and Azumarill is the same typing as Tapu Fini, so Volcanion serves a very similar purpose on this team. So I'm glad to have gotten rid of the Azumarill, but like I said, I wasn't too scared of it in the first place. Gonna switch out here. They're actually gonna go for Earthquake here, predicting me maybe to want to stay in, I don't know. Buzzwole, of course, is gonna scare this out, but I think maybe they're gonna predict me to predict them, and I don't want to play that risky, so I'm going to let their Aegislash come in. It turned out to CC here. I don't know why they CC'd. That was a really, really bad play because close combat doesn't hit anything on my team for super effective damage. In fact, everything on my team resists it, except for Volcanion, which, you could have clicked any other move and it would have been stronger because it would have been Stab. But whatever. I don't know what they were thinking there. Like I said, this is just going to be a quick little game. At this point, they have no switch-ins to my Volcanion. On a quick Flamethrower here. It would be a 2 KO, but I don't want to stay in. Alakazam can come in and take it to Psychic moves. And I can actually click Focus Blast here because I know they're going to go Crocodile. I do connect, which is really nice. They're Chople Berry, and I break through the Chople Berry and kill. At this point, I'm going to go Dragonite to get off that dual Wing Beat. They're going to miss Mega Horn, and at this point, my opponent just forfeits. So a really short game, but a really fun game. It could have been a lot more interesting if maybe my opponent had made a few more plays. But as it was, I thought the team was really cool at the very least. So I decided to include it. And now it's time for the rematch. We are going to be facing the same guy we faced in the previous battle, or the battle before last rather. And rematches are always scary because you don't know what your opponent's going to adapt from the previous game and what they're going to keep doing the same. I led Tapu Lele last time, and I don't really have any reason to change that game plan. And so I'm going to lead off with Tapu Lele again. My opponent will once again also lead off with its Landorus. I'm going to click Psy Shock, same as last time, see what my opponent wants to do. My opponent's going to click Knock Off, which means I can actually switch up moves, but I'm not going to. I'm going to just click Psy Shock in case they decide to stay in. Then I click Focus Blast. The reason I click Focus Blast here is because I just want to get Chip off on this Melmetal. The Assault Vest is a problem for my team, but I don't think I need the terrain to allow Zam to do its job. So I can get off lots of damage on the Melmetal with a Focus Blast, and at that point that'll free up my Volcanion and my Alakazam later on if they need to be in against the Melmetal. So I actually click Focus Blast. They decide to switch out into their Landorus, predicting me to go into something, I'm not sure what. And that actually is fine for me. I do hit my Focus Blast, so I'm getting really lucky with the Focus Blasts. And that allows me to Psy Shock it and KO it. At this point, they're going to click Double Iron Bash. I'm going to go into Zapdos, see if I can get the Para. And they do get the Para, which is really nice. So I'm not getting Steam Eruptions, but we're hitting Focus Blasts, and we're getting a decent amount of statics. which is what I like to see. At this point, I'm going to U-turn out. I've gotten the pair. I'm going to go into Buzzwole. I do want to keep my Buzzwole somewhat healthy, but this is its job. It's going to have to deal with it. Here I'm going to click Ice Punch. This is a prediction that I want to make because having the Zapdos dead really does free up a lot of Pokemon on my team, specifically Buzzwole and Dragonite. And the Dragonite is going to be very important at breaking the rest of these components. So I need to have the Zapdos dead, and I almost certainly know that they're not going to stay in with their Melmetal. If they stay in with their Metal, they just lose to my team, so they cannot stay in. So this is a very safe prediction. Also, since Buzzwole naturally is going to eat any move the Melmetal can go for, I don't get punished too hard for making this prediction. Here, I actually get a crit, which is nice, but doesn't matter because I outspeed and I'm able to two-shot them because I'm offensive Buzzwole. At this point, they're going to go into the Galarian Slowking. I know I do quite a lot at +1, and I know I don't die to Flamethrower. So at this point, I can click another safe Leech Life. I'm not going to predict at this point because at this point, I will die if I overpredict. I'm going to click Close Combat, and again, not going to predict, and I'm going to click Leech Life again, and that actually takes out the Galarian Slowking. So overall, Buzzwole is putting in overtime against this guy's team. I could have saved it here, and I think I probably should have. Here I could have sacked Tapu Lele, or I could have gone... Well, I probably should have sacked Tapu Lele is what I probably should have done, because Buzzwole did do very well against the Melmetal and the Kartana, and even the Tracheon when it wasn't -1 defense. So really, I don't think that was a good play on my part. I definitely should have sacked the Lele, which was at low health, and I could have gotten my train up for free. I especially should have done that because I actually went into Lele right here. Now if you scroll over Lele, I know my Choice Scarf is knocked off. I'm 317, and this is 346 naturally. So unless it's adamant, I will be outsped and die. Of course, they could have missed their Stone Edge, and I would have gotten lucky, but I sacked my Lele here for basically nothing. So I really should have just kept my Buzzwole and sacked the Lele in 1 turn instead of 2 turns. So I'm doing my best to choke away the game right now. But I can go into Alakazam now. Unless this is Choice Scarfed, I can go into Alakazam and I can click Expanding Force. Expanding Force is going to do a decent chunk considering that's a resist and it's Assault Vest. Here he's going to go for Double Iron Bash, which is pretty easy to predict. Here I'm going to click Steam Eruption. I could have clicked Flamethrower here and I would have been a lot more health as a result. But I figured, hey, they might go into Terrakion, try to live the Flamethrower easy, and then they're going to be in with a really strong Pokemon. So I don't want to let that happen. They stay in, however, and they get off a good Earthquake. Does a lot. Now at this point I'm at low health, don't really care what happens to me, and I'm going to Flamethrower. Kartana, not going to let it get a Beast Boost. No Beast Boost for you. Will harden my Dragonite. I can eat that with Multi-Scale, and I can Dragon Dance up here. Now, if they are Choice Banned, like I suspect they are, I'm going to outspeed them. Earthquake is the only move that kills. I wanted to be able to click Dual Wing Beat, even though Dual Wing Beat has a chance to miss. If they happen to be Focus Sash, then I wanted to be able to two-shot them and break through that Focus Sash. But unfortunately that is not one-shot a Terrakion, so I had to go for Earthquake. Unfortunately they were not Focus Sash. And at this point, Kartana, I can just see what it's going to lock itself into. It's almost certainly Scarf as it shows it is. And since that's Smart Strike, I'm going to go into Zapdos. I didn't see this, my guy, sorry. But you know, you can get it from my video. And I'm able to just live whatever it wants and just discharge and kill it. So rematches are always scary. You never know exactly what your opponent's going to want to adapt. And I think my opponent did make some adaptations to the way my team is. But in the end, it all came out to more or less the same, because Buzzwole still does mess my opponent's team up quite a lot. Alright, down to the last game. At this point, we can see that my opponent has a Sticky Web team with Araquanid, so a pretty safe lead on my part is Zapdos, because if I can defog and hit it with Flying, or even, well, technically Flying if I had Hurricane, and Electric moves, then that's a really bad lead up for the Araquanid, and I should be able to prevent Sticky Web from my opponent. So that's what the game plan is. Going to lead off with Zapdos. And my opponent does lead off with the Araquanid, so I'm pretty pleased with that. I'm going to click Discharge here, and we can actually see Discharge is not a 2-hit KO potentially. But they click Toxic, which means I can safely click Discharge again, and I actually get a crit. And I think that may have mattered, so that's unfortunate for them. Then we go to Latios. I have Lele as a switch in. Maybe click Ice Beam, I guess because it's super effective against Zapdos, maybe, I don't know. Here, I could have predicted a Moltres, but it did not. I get a crit, which doesn't really matter because they can roost it off. And Volcanion is a very safe switch into Moltres. I click Steam Eruption here, and I miss. That did matter, so it makes up for earlier. And they would have had a dead Moltres if I had not missed. I don't want to overpredict, so I'm going to Steam Eruption. No burn, of course. I've already shown Lele, but it's still a pretty decent switch in, and it's going to scare it out. Here they predict me to predict them. I'm not going to make that mistake. Then I click Moonblast, and down goes their Latios. I don't want to lose my Lele, and I actually died to U-turn, which is insane. Dragonite's going to scare out the Excadrill. I'm just going to Dragon Dance up, don't know what they want to do. I don't want to get burned, so I'm going to switch into Volcanion, which is definitely a safe switch in. I'm going to once again click Steam Eruption. They have no switch-ins to it. They don't want to get burned by Steam Eruption. Scorching Sands isn't going to kill. I will note that I do outspeed this Moltres, which means it's a very bulky Moltres indeed. Tapu Koko, no good switch-ins to it. And they turn out to be what I assume is Choice Banded, Thunder Punch. So I'm going to go into Buzzwole since I'm a physical tank. I get crit and paralyzed, which is pretty important, but I also get a crit in return. So I guess that somewhat balances that out. I'm going to go into Zapdos because I don't trust it to beat the Excadrill or this. They get another crit, which I don't think really mattered, but just sort of funny to know. Lele is going to outspeed. I'm going to click Focus Blast in case they go Excadrill, and I'm actually able to take out the Koko. I'm going to save this in case Urshifu gets out of hand. They are bulk up Urshifu. Very scary. I do have a Choice Scarf Tapu Lele in the back, but it's still very scary. I'm actually going to go into Dragonite though, because Lele would just invite in the Excadrill, and Dragonite can actually get off a dual Wing Beat and 2-hit KO a bulked up Urshifu. Urshifu does not have Ice Punch, so it cannot threaten Dragonite with any of its moves, and I'm not in range of Aqua Jet, so I can just 2-hit KO it with dual Wing Beat, and then I can Earthquake the Excadrill. Now, the Excadrill actually turns out to be Focus Sash, so we got the late game Sash. If they had wanted to win, they could have gone for 2 Rapid Spins, but they would have had to have gotten a crit on the second Rapid Spin, or the first one, in order to have actually done enough damage to my Dragonite, because Sash Excadrill is rather weak. So if we go to the damage calc, we can see that Focus Sash Excadrill at +2 would have outsped a Choice Scarf Tapu Lele, and at +1 it would have outsped my Dragonite. But the Dragonite from Rapid Spin takes 18 to 21%, and they needed to do 45%, which means one of these would have had to have been a crit. Otherwise, they cannot outspeed my Tapu Lele in the end, and they would have lost no matter what. So that would have been the only way they could have gotten out of that, but otherwise it was basically GG once they got off the Earthquake. So overall, that was a pretty fun game. Really interesting sets and pretty scary. Interesting to see Moltres, always pretty interesting mon, just because you don't think of Moltres as being tanky, but as you saw, it really did shut down my Tapu Lele with Mystical Fire. It probably had Toxic, Boost, and maybe U-turn or something, I'm not sure. Defog maybe. So Moltres it definitely has a niche in OU, but because I had Volcanion randomly, that actually counter beat the Moltres really hard. So that was lucky on my part. Physical Tapu Koko was scary, was not expecting that. A really good game to my opponent, really scary team. Overall, I think my team definitely could use some work. I think it has some noticeable weaknesses, and I think that maybe the Zapdos could be traded out for something else, but at the same time you saw how much Zapdos did against some of these teams. So I hesitate to say that right off the bat. I would say Alakazam was somewhat of a weak component if we're being completely honest, but I don't really know what to do about that. Maybe there's some other kind of archetype that Alakazam would fit better into. Mega Alakazam was really nice back in Gen 6 and 7 because Mega Alakazam could trace, and that gave it a lot of utility over normal Alakazam, and of course it had the increased stats to boot. but normal Alakazam just really has been power crept at this point and can't do as much. So hopefully in Generation 9 we bring back Megas so Alakazam can put in work again. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today. I'll see you next time.